Good morning, everyone. Today, our topic for epidemiology is environmental epidemiology. Our group members are Kudani Sarbani, Satyalikhit Gandhi Reddy, Indelakanti Swanika Reddy, Prathik Rana, Rakshak Janjanam, Harsha, Harsha. And let's go into the topic. Introduction to environmental epidemiology. A table of content. Here, definition of terms and components of definitions, environmental epidemiology and types of environmental exposures, interactions and populations in ambient environment, risk factors interaction, history of environmental epidemiology, contributions of epidemiology to environmental health, concerns with populations and use of observational data. Let's move to the next slide. The first slide is definition of terms. In this, the application of the study to the prevention of disease and promotion of health. What is health? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Next, next term is disease. A disease is a physiological or psychological dysfunction. Illness. Illness is subject to state of not being well. And the last is sickness. Sickness means a state of social dysfunction. Let's move to the next slide. Here let's see the components of definitions. What is study? The systematic collection, analysis and interpretation of data in epidemiology involves collection, analysis and interpretation of health related data. Epidemiology is a science in which now the next one is frequency. Frequency, the number of times an event occurred. Epidemiology studies the number of times a disease occurs. It answers the question how many. Epidemiology is a quantitative science. Now the third one is distribution. Distribution of an event by person, place and time. Epidemiology studies distribution of diseases. It answers the question who, where and when. Epidemiology describes health events. Now move to the next slide. The fourth one is determinants. Factors the presence absence of which affect the occurrence and level of event. Epidemiology studies what determines health events. It answers the question how and why. Epidemiology analyzes health events. Now the fifth one is diseases and health related events. In this, the diseases other health related events. Epidemiology is not only the study of diseases. This also focus of epidemiology are not only patients. It studies all health related conditions. Epidemiology is a broader science. Now move to the next slide. Here we can see human population. In human population, epidemiology diagnoses and treats communities or populations. The clinical medicine diagnoses and treats patients. Epidemiology is a basic science of public health. Now the last is applications. Epidemiological studies have direct and practical applications for prevention and disease promotions of health. Epidemiology is a science and practice. Epidemiology is an applied science. Now the next part will be continued by Pratik Rana. Thank you.
Environmental epidemiology. It is a branch of epidemiology concerned with determining how environmental exposures impact human health. It is also the study of distribution and environmental determinants of disease. This observational science relies upon events occurring within human population, so-called natural experiments from which inference is drawn to identify causes of disease. Environmental epidemiology focuses on physical, chemical, and biological agents in the environment as disease risk factors, often affecting large populations. Environmental epidemiology helps us to understand how various external risk factors may predispose to or protect against diseases, illness, injury, developmental abnormalities, or death. Environmental epidemiology is the most important tool in making environmental management decisions owing to its capacity to assess and monitor environmental hazards in different settings and quantify their health impact on the population at risk. Types of environmental exposures. There are various means via which one can experience environmental exposures. These include chemical hazards, which arise from mishandling of different chemicals, various types of fumes, corrosives, liquids, or dust. Biological hazards can be those that cause biological or contagious harm, such as viruses, blood, or mold. UV radiation, narcotic residue are also examples of environmental exposures. Having contact with chemical, biological, or physical substance found in the air, water, food, or soil that may have a harmful effect on a person's health. A person may also be exposed to harmful substances by swallowing food that is contaminated with bacteria or pesticide, or by absorbing harmful chemicals through the skin. The amount of harm caused by environmental exposure depends on the amount of exposure, the way a person is exposed, and how long a person is exposed. Some types of environmental exposures may increase the risk of certain diseases, such as lung disease, heart disease, and cancer, and may also lead to birth defects.
Good day everyone. I am Shwanika Reddy. In as of our group topic Environment Epidemiology, my subtopic is Interaction and Pollutants in Ambient Environment. And coming to here, it's a picture representation of ambient environment. And in this, we have two types of things, that is air pollution and physical activity. So impact of physical activity on inhaled dose of air pollution. In this they are divided into three types, and it is air pollution concentrations in location of physical activity, and the other is potential of walking and cycling to reduce air pollution emissions, and the next one is risk benefits trade off of exercising in polluted air. And now in impact of air pollution on physical activity behavior, it is potential of air pollution to reduce overall physical activity levels, and other one is potential of air pollution to reduce physical activity during high air pollution days. Going on to the next slide, we have air pollution, and it is determined as the presence of pollutants in the air in large quantities for long periods. Air pollutants are dispersed particles, hydrocarbons, CO, CO2, NO, NO2, SO3, etc. And water pollution. This is an organic and inorganic charge and biological charge at high levels that affect the water quality. The next one is soil pollution. This occurs through the release of chemicals or disposal of waste, such as heavy metals, hydrocarbons, and pesticides. The fourth one is radioactive and nuclear pollution. Releasing radioactive and nuclear pollutants into water, air, and soil during nuclear explosions and accidents from nuclear weapons and through handling or disposal of radioactive sewage. So, radioactive materials can contaminate surface water bodies and being noxious to the environment, plants and animals and humans. This is also known that several radioactive substances such as radium, uranium concentrate in the bones and can cause cancers. The other one is noise pollution, and it is produced by machines, vehicles, traffic noises, and musical installations that are harmful to our hearing. Air pollution can directly contaminate the surface of bodies of water and soil. This can kill crops or reduce their yield. It can kill young trees and other plants. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide particles in the air can create acid rain when they mix with water and oxygen in the atmosphere. Air pollution is one of the greatest environmental risks to health. By reducing air pollution levels, countries can reduce the burden of disease from stroke, heart disease, lung cancer, and both chronic and acute respiratory diseases, including asthma. The lower levels of air pollution, the better the cardiovascular and respiratory health of the population will be, both long term and short term. And here are the causes. So, prolonged exposure can cause serious medical conditions such as cancer, heart attacks, and strokes. So, in fact, one in three deaths from strokes, lung cancer, and chronic respiratory disease globally are caused by air pollution. And air pollution, here is the representation in pictorially. So, air pollution is divided into three types. It is global mortality, pulmonary mortality, cardiovascular mortality, and it consists of immune system, lungs, heart and vessels, endocrine system, brain, and fetus.
Risk factors interaction and the environmental exposures such as air pollution, the water, the endocrine disrupting chemicals, persistent organic pollutants, the metals, the ultraviolet radiations, and exposures to the nature have been shown to the influence or mortality and incidence and severity of many chronic diseases. The added risks from the environmental factors interact with the non-environmental risk factors, that is behavior, that is smoking, drugs, or alcohol abuse. Uh, Social health is a hygiene, the nutrients, and the stress. The genetic is heredity, susceptibility, and the psychological is age, sex, pregnancy, weight, height, and respiration, and professional exposure. And all exposures, the time of exposure from the population and individual may take three basic forms: is acute, subacute, and chronic. Subacute is a less than 1 month by whatever the route and repetition. Subchronic doses are between the 1 and 3 months. The chronic exposure from the 1 month and 3 months to the lifetime. The subacute exposure, less than 1 month by whatever the route repetition, may take place where the population lives in houses built on contaminated land or near an old industrial waste tip. They may also be continuous low-level exposure that is episodically increased by development or climate causes. In such environments, children are particularly at risk because of their playing activities. Acute doses occurs less than 24 hours, usually due to some accidental release of material, perhaps from industrial accidents or fires, other than in an anecdotal or publicly reported form. No longer term records are currently kept of incidents, leading to exposure of population and little acute information about the precise nature of a material, that exposure levels, or the people exposed. Clearly, there are a number of potential victims of a sudden chemical release in this way. Employees and others in an immediate vicinity where the release takes place, the population within the exposure area, and the emergency services and other who have to deal with their immediate problems and effects of the release. The chronic exposure. The chronic exposure for more than 3 months of the lifetime may occur, whereas the control of industrial process may low level releases into the atmosphere, or where there is a continuous dietary or occupational exposure. For example, the drinking water supplies the containing chloroform, increased mercury dosage due to the overlarge consumption of tuna, or accumulating in cooking oil that has been used too high a temperature and not changed regularly. The amount of exposure can be assessed in 6 ways. There are interviews, questions, and diaries to record what people observe of their own exposure, both in the time and degree. Physical, chemical, and microbiological measurement on water, air, or the soil. Sampling the personal environment, for example, food eaten or air breathed, measured for the doses of exposure. The concentration of a chemical in human tissue, example, lead in a blood or teeth. Markers of Physiological effects of exposure. The carboxyhemoglobin as an indicator exposure to the tobacco smoke. The rest is continued by the further by
Epidemiology. It has a long history that dates back 2000 or more years. First, we have in about 400 BC, the ancient Greek authority Hippocrates explained the role of environmental factors such as water quality and air causing diseases. Second, we have like he produced the well known book on airs, waters, and places, historical cornerstone of environmental epidemiology. Next, we have the Sir Percival Port, thought to be the first individual to describe an environmental cause of cancer. In his book, chirurgical observations related to the cataract, the polypus of the nose, the cancer of the scrotum, the different kinds of ruptures, and the mortification of the toes and feet in 1775. He wrote a chapter called A Short Treatise of the Chimney Sweeper's Cancer. In 1775, he observed that chimney sweepers had a high incidence of scrotal cancer in comparison with male workers in another occupation, sweepers' cancer. Next, provided the first clear description of an environmental cause of cancer, established an occupational hygiene control measures bathe once a week 3. John Snow, English anesthetist, linked a cholera outbreak in London to contaminated water from the Thames River, suggested a way to prevent the disease and led indirectly to the synthesis of the first known pure carcinogen and the isolation of the first carcinogenic chemicals. Thank you.
Hello everyone, myself Rakshak Chandanam and my continuing my part contributions of epidemiology to environmental health. Epidemiology makes a special contribution to environmental health through its focus on entire populations and by its use of descriptive and analytic methodologies. Epidemiology aids the environmental field through the following concepts: concern with populations, use of observation data, methodology for study designs, and descriptive and analytic studies. Epidemiology is most important to study of environmental health problems because there are many exposures and health effects associated with the environment which occur at the population level, and also the epidemiologic methods of the natural experiments and also observational techniques are appropriate. The study designs used in epidemiologic research can be applied directly to the study of environmental health issues, and also epidemiology aids in the development of the hypothesis and the study of the causal relationships. For many chronic degenerative diseases of potential interest in environmental epidemiology, data on rates of occurrence, which incidence in defined populations, which are not routinely collected. In also the addition exposure is rarely assessed in a manner compatible with the needs of epidemiologic investigation. Thus, it is often impossible to determine whether the incidence of a particular disease has changed or in response to a new or changing environmental exposure. Where a gradient of exposure can be determined, the risk of the disease can also sometimes be related to dose in a specially designed study. However, in many instances, diseases of possible environmental etiology cannot be examined in the relation which to the environmental factors until baseline disease incidences have been determined and appropriate measures or estimates of exposure have been developed. Study of the health outcomes associated with the environmental exposures suffers from a lack of sophisticated technology for assessing chronic effects, from the basic meteorological limits of study designs, and from the highly charged climate in which such studies are at times conducted. Moreover, epidemiology studies directly contribute data or risk in humans as the investigator species and in the full food intake range normally encountered by humans. Cross-sectional study designs, rather than the more reliable cohort or case-control studies, are often required in environmental epidemiology. Until quite recently, federal and state support has focused on the need for also rapid health assessments that do not necessarily comply which of the with the requirements for environmental epidemiology. And few academic departments of epidemiology have concentrated on refinements in which the techniques needed to improve environmental epidemiology. And those too much struggle with limited resources also. The remainder of this volume outlines strategies that can remedy these problems. At last, epidemiology is important to study of environmental health problems because many exposures and health effects associated with the environment occur at the population level. The epidemiologic methods of natural experiments and observation techniques are also appropriate. Thank you and continued by my friend Ketan.
My name is Kerasya Ketan. Contribution. Epidemiology is important to the study of environmental health problem because many exposure and health affected associate with environment occur at the population level. Concern with population. The epidemiologic method of natural experiment and of observational techniques are appropriate. Environmental epidemiology is the study of how environmental factors influence human health. It is a subfield of epidemiology and public health. The field of environmental epidemiology is concerned with population and use of observational data. Environmental epidemiologists are interested in the relationship between human health and the environment, including chemical exposure, climate change, food safety, air quality, and water quality. Faculty challenge establish of installation quality standards related to the online education is paramount importance in online education. Effective communication is the key factor bridging the divide and record recounseling administrator and faculty for the enhanced online education. A considerable number of our faculty report lack of access to hardware, software, and necessary tools for online instruction, especially is in the absence of traditional in class whiteboard. Many faculty members indicated lacking an online writing tool. This issue can be addressed by installations budget allocation to acquire necessary hardware and tools. development of online learning assessment methods as rigorous as in the conventional face-to-face setting to the prevent cheating is not straightforward. White one cannot propose a single assessment method that would work ideally for all engineers course and classroom it would still be interesting to study how various online exams and assessment methods stack up against each other. Since the onset pandemic, a limited number of studies have conducted to evaluate the success and challenge of the online assessment. Thank you.